we felt we had to get back together and talk about what has been nothing less than a surrealistic week here in the United States of America. And as we record this, it's only Thursday, so there could be all sorts of stuff between now and the time you hear this. So first of all, Richard Wolff, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here.
And how are you reacting to the barrage of declarations, proclamations, executive orders, insinuations that we're getting out of our new president at the White House?
Well, for me, I find myself a little bit like a child in a spectacular circus, having never seen a circus before. All of these noises going off, all of these flashing colors, all of this bravado BS, it's a little overwhelming. And when you take a step back from it, it is absurd, but in a very calculated manner. So let me tell you a little bit of what I mean. It is, of course, possible for the United States to want to revisit a treaty that it initiated and that it signed twice in the recent past. I'm talking about NAFTA and its rewrite and re-signing under the first Trump administration, signed by Mr. Trump. I could imagine that various considerations could be brought up to suggest that the United States wants to see a revisiting, a renegotiation, an updating, could be put in 100 different ways, inviting the partners with whom we share 1,000-mile borders, Canada and Mexico, to sit down and see if they agree and see if we can work out a way to accommodate the years that have passed and the needs of the United States, if they're there, to rethink it, to rewrite it. That I could understand. What I cannot understand is that the president has announced that he's going to do a whole host of things terribly dangerous for Mexico and Canada, totally violating the treaty he signed, he personally signed, and announcing it as something that is going to be done and imposed and enforced by the United States, hinting that militarily might not be off the table, and that the excuse for it is quote unquote national security and quote unquote the drug trade. Well, you know, I'm an older person. The drug trade has been with us for all my life. Every president in my lifetime has committed himself to a war on drugs, which continues to this day, because whoever the enemy exactly is, he has not been vanquished. The drugs are all around us. So what in the world has the one got to do with violating, breaking, and rejecting the treaty? Number two, we were having friendly relations, as far as I knew, with our two neighbors. Why are they being talked to this way, treated this way? It's only going to put their hackles up, which of course it has done. It has only forced them to call on all nationalism in their society to repel all. This is so weird and strange that it bespeaks a mentality we ought to wonder about. And then, as if to make that not look as bad as it might, we have the spectacle of the President of the United States with his nuclear Armageddon threatening to take back the Panama Canal. What? If again you wanted to question something about the canal, you can do that. You can call a meeting. You can have a summit with the head of Panama. You could bring it to the attention of the Organization of American States. You could lay out a reasoned argument, but you didn't do any of that. You just suddenly blurted out like a person who forgot the environment they're in and also had one martini too many, and bleh, out it came with half of today's lunch. This is bizarre.
Well,
This country was created, Panama, to manage the canal, which it has done, by all accounts, pretty well. It has led to a number of countries, including China, which is reasonable because China ranks number 2 after the United States in making use of the canal for its ships. So the Chinese have done what, of course, they would have been expected to do, built facilities to handle their shipping since it goes through the canal, just as the United States has done. So clearly, what this is another way theatrically to hit at China. And to make sure we understood that, President Trump said he's going to take it back because the Chinese have grabbed it or are about to grab it or might grab it or may seem to be. This is unfriggin' believable. The Chinese have been using the canal for many years. They have been building facilities around the canal, typical to handle shipping, for many years. Nothing is new. Nothing has increased. What in the what? And then with all the bravado, we're taking it back. This has all the serious quality of changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico, which he's also decided unilaterally to do, even though that Gulf has a coastline with other countries beside the United. This is bravado, bullying, but above all, an attempt to deny that the position of the United States in the world has been shrinking, not growing. These look like the petulant theatrics of a person who doesn't understand that those are not a substitute for the reality on the ground. And to have a leader do all of these in a big flurry just suggests the theatric implications of it all. But I don't at all miss that it could have disastrous consequences for the immediate countries involved, Canada, Mexico, and Panama, because they are smaller, weaker, and they could be really hurt by some of this, but also by the image in those countries, but around the world, of an increasingly dangerous, out of control bully country. And that cannot be in the long-term interest of the United States.
it's interesting because as you were talking, a couple keywords that you said connected with what I've been thinking and the further thoughts that came to my mind as you were talking about this. One keyword is theater. And all along, since Trump was elected and since he took office, it seems to me that there's a heavily theatrical, of course, element about this, which doesn't mean that he might not do something
Right.
crazy and extreme, but whether he does or doesn't, there's a theater about it. And but the party not at the table so far in our conversation today, Rick, is the Democratic Party, because it seems to me that if you strip the crudity of Trump and his colleagues away, if you strip away the sort of brutish outpouring and, sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, but inability to keep his worst thoughts to himself, name for it, but I don't want to stigmatize people who actually have that condition. That if you strip that aside, there are some common threads, first of all, between what Trump is doing and what the bipartisan assumption of the US political system has been all along. The bipartisan assumption, first of all, well, we'll get to the theater in a second. Bipartisan assumption is that we have a right to maintain our global supremacy and our global empire by any means necessary, regardless of the effect on the rest of the world, regardless of the effect on the citizenry of the United States of America when it comes to that, regardless of what happens to the planet, the nations. We can do that at any cost. So if we want to make it impossible to buy an affordable electric car to sustain that illusion, Democratic and Republican administrations will both do it. If we want to arm ourselves to the teeth in the South China Sea and accelerate a Cold War posture with China as well as Russia, both parties will do it. If we, the only different, well, not the only difference, I don't mean to oversimplify, there are radical differences, but one of the differences is the nature of the theater. It's like watching a kabuki play being interrupted by like a world wrestling, crew of like guys hitting each other with chairs. I mean, there's a very big cultural clash here, but underneath it, there are some common assumptions. Supposedly, we believe in dignitaries and diplomacy, and so the Democrats have upheld that illusion. But to most of the people of the world, I would argue, inside and outside the United States, they're like, it is an illusion. Well, what are they doing for me? So they like to get together and call each other, the honorable gentleman from this and the honorable gentle lady from that. So Trump is kind of offering bread and circuses with nuclear missiles for the people. But I would argue that if it were not for the more genteel theatrics of both parties up to now, because he represents a disruption in the behavior of both parties, there might not be an audience for this. He might not be where he's sitting today. I mean, I almost feel as if the voters of the United States of America, who, by the way, didn't elect him by a big margin, no matter what they said, but they did elect him, are saying, this play is boring. If you're going to make us sit in the theater, let's see some action here. And I wouldn't underestimate that, enough with this, let's see a Punch and Judy show kind of attitude behind it. So, and just one last thing, the through thread, whether it's blaming, Latin America for the drug crisis, or being mad that China uses Panama. President of Columbia said once, not Columbia University, another colonial outpost, the nation of Columbia, said at one point, had a good quote. He said, "The only law that the drug dealers obey is the law of supply and demand." These drugs come into the country because people want them. People want them because the system is broken. Chinese goods are wanted across the country. That's why, across the world rather. That's why they pass through the Panama Canal. So we're trying to, on a multiplicity of levels, throw up this theater of one kind or another while not addressing the root causes behind, why people don't like the show. I guess I'll leave it at that. What do you think?
I love it, but it leads me to ask you the obvious question. Britain's empire was based on them dominating the world economy, right? The sun never sets on the British Isle. We are everywhere. We dominate, and we have the best navy to protect our global. Did it save their empire from going down? No. The empire before them was the dominant player, the Dutch, the French. If you want to go back further, the Greek, the Roman. I mean, stop. What is this nonsense? This is a weird theater of gesture, of put America first. First of all, every politician who's ever been in that office has said more or less that. The only difference you might say is Mr. Trump tries to emphasize that because it's such an old, empty phrase by demonizing his predecessor and Democrats and even earlier Republicans as woefully inattentive to putting America first, which is not only historically inaccurate, it's more childish. What are you doing? What is this? It's not just hyperbole in terms of how you're speaking. There's more going on here. There is a determined cheerleader here. We're going to get them. We're going to get the Chinese with a tariff. We're going to get them in Taiwan. We're going to get them with our Navy in the South China Sea. And now we're going to get them in Panama. We're going to get them. Meanwhile, with all of that noise, which he did in his first presidential race, which was sadly copied in large part by Biden. Mm-hmm. What happened? The United States has fallen further behind China. The gap between the G7's economic footprint in the world economy and the BRICS economic footprint has gotten further and further apart in the favor of the Chinese. They are outdoing us. This year, the International Monetary Fund, a Western organization supportive of the West in every way, announced, just in case anyone hadn't caught it, that 2024, the U.S. economy grew 2.8%. 2024, the Chinese economy grew 5%. And the Indian economy, 7%. That means the two major players in the BRICS, India and China, are growing respectively 2 and 3 times faster than the United States. This is a joke. We're not in good shape economically in the world. We are presiding over an empire that's declining and a capitalist system in deep doo-doo. And I offer this as a professional economist, not that you need it much, but then to go on with these gestures of domination and we're going to get the canal back. Whether we get the canal back or not isn't going to change these things. It's either stupid, if he actually believes it, or really one of the grossest substitutions of theater for reality that I've ever seen.
Well, for at least since the 1800s, people have been writing about and mapping life cycles of empires as a common exercise in scholarly thinking and political thinking. So it's no surprise to me that you bring that up. Of course, it's one of the obvious to me signs of the flailings of a failing empire and all of this, but that's what makes it so frightening, because desperate people, desperate powers, desperate nations sometimes do desperate things. Now, it was fascinating to me, and I'm not the only one who caught it, that Trump actually used the phrase manifest destiny to describe this ambition to expand the global footprint of the United States. And he speaks glowingly about which president? McKinley. So here we have a fantasy world of what might be called the sunrise of the American empire, right? We had westward expansion with all its attendant horrors on the indigenous people there, but westward expansion, growing economy, industrialization, a world of what seemed like infinite possibility, how we could expand out west for a lifetime and not be halfway there. And he wants to evoke that. And how are we going to have our westward expansion and our manifest destiny? We're going to buy Greenland and all 68,000 people who live there. This is his idea. It would be embarrassing if it weren't for the fact that this guy controls the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons on planet Earth. And it's, we didn't see any disarmament strategies from the Biden administration. Now we see this weird kind of bellicosity from Trump. We see also, I don't know if you noticed that in effect, the foreign minister of the European Union said last week, I agree with Trump. We need to, every European country has got to expand its defense spending to 5%, because I forget her exact wording, but we should be prepared for an eventual military conflict with Russia. So this entire system is flailing, and led by Trump, led by the United States. But I didn't see this crazy stuff out of Biden, except in Gaza, where there was a genocidal war crime. But I sure as hell didn't see any attempts at disarmament, any attempts to downsize our military spending. Quite the opposite. So here we've got this combination of manifest destiny and incipient fascism, and to me, the illusion that's going to sustain it is more like imperial Rome. We're going to have Trump Augustus in his robes and God knows who else, while we march off, in search of lands to conquer. To me, this is going from a dangerous illusion to a ludicrously self-destructive illusion. I don't know. That's what I get out of all this.
I love the calling into play, the Monroe Doctrine, which is the manifest destiny, the origin of the notion of a manifest destiny. Let me do a little history. The manifest destiny is a pronouncement full of bravado by an American government that has done two things that are impressive. It has defeated Britain in a military confrontation, the Revolutionary War of 1776. And then when the British tried a second time in the War of 1812 to do it again, it was defeated again. And the United States was now in a position to say, hey, we are the defeaters of England. Between the First and the Second War in the United States, Britain had fought Napoleon, who was arguably the most powerful leader Europe had ever seen, and defeated, finally, Napoleon. Wow. So what defeated Napoleon was the British, and what defeated the British was the Americans. And so the Americans had a moment of self-glorification that was unrivaled in terms of anything they had seen before. And as if to drive home to the Europeans what it meant, it basically said, okay, you've taken over Asia and Africa and all of that, and you can, and we don't care. But our empire is south of us. Latin America, the Western Hemisphere, and that's our destiny now that we have bested you Europeans. Okay? And so where are we now? We lost the war in Vietnam. We lost the war. We fought that against the Communist Party of North Vietnam. They're in charge ever since we left. They're the people who we fought against. They run the country. That's called losing the war. Then we went to Afghanistan, where once again we lost the war. That war was fought against the Taliban. Who's in charge in Afghanistan today? The Taliban. Clue. We lost the war. In Iraq, we tried to suppress what? An Arab, it's a long story, but Muslim majority
Right.
that is in power now. And unless you are an American reading American newspapers, we are now losing the war in Iraq. You know what those are signs of? Not signs that you're the dominant, you just defeated the British Empire, which just defeated the Napoleonic Empire. No, you're now losing in wars against the poorest countries on this planet. You're losing. You don't look good, Jack. You look awful. So your pronouncement that you're going to take this and you're going to take that, it's not lost on any of us that these are puny appointments, oppositions. The good people of Panama, really? Of Greenland, really? Of your two major neighboring trading partners, really? Come on. Who are you kidding? This is theater, but it's not just theater by the desperate. More important, it's theater for the desperate. They are producing a theater they think will sell. And clearly, the election shows that there's half the people in this country whose anxieties, much more realistically grounded in the actual weakness of the American economy, those anxieties are looking for something. And until they wise up, they will be open to theatrics because and only because it's better than nothing. And as you're saying in your contributions here today, the Democratic Party gives them no alternative worth being excited about at all. And so that's one more reason to go with the theater, as the French would say, faute de mieux, for lack of something better.
Right. And, the other dimension of it, you said it was theater not only by the despot, but for the despot and his courtiers, I would add. We have this extraordinarily bizarre spectacle of one Mr. Elon Musk, inheritor of a apartheid era fortune, other made billionaire, as all billionaires are, doing, I'm as skeptical as they come about some of these claims, a very Nazi-like salute, shouting out support for the far-right AfD party in Germany, retweeting, quasi-fascist, and he's the president's right hand. You have these other tech billionaires dutifully sitting behind Mr. Trump in his inauguration. That is to the extent, and by the way, perhaps coincidentally, perhaps not, the Silicon Valley billionaires have been dying to get their hands on the U.S. military budget. They want to disrupt the military industry. They want to displace Lockheed Martin and all these other companies, General Dynamics, with their new, vaporware, which is essentially what they sell, autonomous drones that will decide who to kill and who to not kill. So, it's also, that's where it gets really, really scary to me, because you have extraordinary amounts of wealth in a few hands being deployed on behalf of this ludicrous theatrical, amalgam of Nero and Caligula, and they can do a lot of damage because we don't have a functioning democracy. So, when Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg were behind Trump, that's what percentage of American national wealth? Significant. Probably more than 150 million other Americans. So, It don't look so good. What do you think?
I mean, I was struck, and I noticed a number of foreign newspapers that I read also were struck that on the dais right behind him, real close, were all these billionaires. Were not the honorifics, the heads of the Congress and so forth, who Marjorie Taylor Greene, a lunatic in her own right, she was able to get angry and look at this and say, why are we not up there? We're the ones who worked hard to get him the job. And she didn't understand. Yeah, that's your function. Go out and get the votes. But it's the money that pays for this all. And that's where the money is. And the president goes where the money is. And he wants the people close to him. Look, this is his greatest moment from being thought of as a junior, vulgar, forgettable character, as he has most of his life. These people who look down their noses at him were coming in order to secure his signature on whatever their latest project is. It's extraordinary. He wants, to go with them. And now let me be an economist again. That's the only sector of the United States that remains both capitalist and dynamic. It's changing, it's growing, it's reinvesting a good bit of its money, and it's doing well that way. Everything else in the United States is in trouble, even the military, which will be an argument used. The latest missile that the Russians deployed is a missile that is more capable, not only than anything the United States has, but is able to avoid all the anti-aircraft, anti-missile defense that the West has. It turns out the Russians, who are a much smaller, much poorer economy than the United States, right, were able, by overstressing their military, to make this kind of a breakthrough. It's not strong, it's weak. That's why the numbers I gave before, the GDP, the G7, all of it. This is an economy in trouble, but it is determined to give the centerpiece to the tech people in California, because it's the only growth industry basically left, and to try to beat up on China to hold it back. They've had absolutely no success in the latter for the last 20 years, and there's no prospect of success in the future. So what's left? The bromance between the government and the high-tech industry, and that's what you saw on display. That's what this inauguration solidifies. And I think you're going to see that Mr. Musk is inheriting the intrinsic logic of capitalism, which makes very few people very wealthy and the mass of people very unwealthy. It has done that always. The book by Piketty in France a few years ago that got all that attention takes 600 statistical pages to show you that wherever capitalism has settled, it has generated rising inequality, punctuated only by those infrequent moments when the mass of people rose up protesting it. Then it stopped for a while, and as soon as those protests died down, it resumed. Elon Musk is where capitalism has always been going, only now it's been unfettered for enough decades to give him $400 billion. And he's doing what a tiny minority of super rich people do, is protect themselves by using their money to buy the political system, whether it be in Germany or here, to buy the media. Bezos owns the Washington Post. I mean, it's a joke. It isn't. And now Musk says he wants to buy TikTok. You're watching the logic of capitalism. And the only interesting thing to me is, as more and more people see how ugly it is, how fundamentally anti-democratic, it's still taking them time to recognize that the problem is capitalism and not some particular policy or particular politician.
And, this will take a whole other conversation, Wolff, to address, but lingering in the background is the F word, fascism, which is, to me, it's a gradient. It's a sliding scale that whenever money and an authoritarian government align with an institution, especially with an institutionalized religion, that's there floating in the background. How much, how little, we don't know. But to me, the blatantness of Elon Musk basically buying Trump this presidency and then playing with it like a toy, with his stiff arm salutes and his stupid committee and all this, it's not a disruption. It's an evolution, almost perhaps in that you were saying of capitalism, almost an inevitable evolution of the attempt to meld capitalism and democracy, I think. But that's my closing thought. What's yours?
And mine is that for me, and I spent a lot of my life studying German fascism above all, but also a little bit Francisco's in Spain and Mussolini's in Italy. When you cannot get the voluntary acceptance of capitalism anymore, when you can't get people to accept this level of wages, so that whether in Starbucks or in Amazon, they're beginning to say in larger no. When you see federal employees gearing up to say no to the presidential order that you have to come back to work in the office so we can dominate you in a way we can't if you're at home. When the resistance to that builds, this is a president who will be confronted with a temptation he probably cannot resist, which is to use the military, to begin to fuse the repressive apparatus of the government with the economic system, because you can't preserve the economic system any other way. People become authoritarian when the situation pulls that out of them or them into it, whichever way you like. And that is happening here. And that is the direction. We're not there yet, but this is not a president who will hesitate. Look at him.
No.
In order to make his theater against the immigrant look good, he sends a token number of military right away, his first days in office. That amount of military makes no difference to the issue. It's all the theater. The army, I'm going to use the army. And what's it a theater for? Let me end with this. History teaches us that countries that are inhumane to their foreign enemies will sooner or later do the same thing to their own people. The horror of Israel is not just what they do to Arabs, but what they are and will continue to do more and more to their own people, to their own Jewish people.
Right. And their own children in universities and high schools. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the best thing I can say to that is it's going to be interesting. So, Richard Wolff, as always, thanks so much for your thoughts. And as always, thanks for coming on the program.
My pleasure, and looking forward already to the next one.
Me too. We depend on your support here at the 0 Hour, so please give whatever you can at any of the links you see on your screen. Thanks so much.